And welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers, happy to be with you. Each week we're here meeting interesting people and talking about topical issues. And this week we'll be talking to an expert about the oil industry and energy in general.
Energy in general, it's certainly a topic on everybody's mind all the time with $100 oil and the like, and of course very expensive gasoline prices in the process. But it's something that we need to focus on a little bit and find out what's going on in Oklahoma, what's going on nationally, and what's going on internationally.
That's right. A global perspective today of the energy sector and talking with Mark Stansberry. It's all coming up next on The Verdict.
Every day America uses clean-burning natural gas instead of coal or oil is a day of victory for our environment. That's why Chesapeake chose to explore for natural gas exclusively, and we've never looked back. Because natural gas burns twice as clean as oil or coal, and reducing carbon emissions to combat potential global warming is every bit as urgent as cutting our dependence on energy imports. As America's #1 driller of new gas wells, Chesapeake is moving fast to find untapped reserves of natural gas here at home. It's the right fuel for America's economy and the fuel for a clean air future. We just happen to be early to see it so clearly. Chesapeake, natural gas wins the day.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Yeah, today we're very pleased to have Mark Stansberry, the chairman of GTD Group, joining us as a guest on The Verdict. He did his undergraduate work right here in Oklahoma at Oklahoma Christian University, and he's now a trustee at Oklahoma Christian University. He's been active in the energy sector both locally, nationally, and internationally for 30-some years now. He is the chairman of the State Energy Committee for the State Chamber of Commerce, and he's been active in energy circles not only locally but internationally for a number of years. He is the recent author of a book called The Breaking Point, which we'll talk more about in a minute. This is his first visit to The Verdict. Mark, welcome.
Thank you so much.
The GTD Group, what does it do?
The GT Group stands for Global Trade Development. We founded the company back in the late 90s, and it the focus is international trade as well as energy, even though we have other areas, sectors that we work in, construction, environmental, and others. We have an alliance with a group in Washington, D.C. called BKSH. They have offices in 24 cities internationally, and that helps us provide consultants, professionals. They have over 2,000 professionals worldwide. So we're able to tap into that and to bring Oklahoma into the international play as far as exports, but also an energy sector as well. And we have offices here in Washington, D.C., and also, of course, Tulsa and Oklahoma City.
You've written this book, Mark, called The Breaking Point. Mick's going to hold it up for us, but it's spelled B-R-A-K-I-N-G, Breaking Point. Tell us about that. What is the message of your book? Why did you write this book?
I wrote the book because when I gave speeches across the country, I'd find that there were so many, misinformation. that the oil and gas industry was the culprit that causes all the problems, that we needed to do away with the oil and gas industry, and that we needed to just look at renewables and so forth. Well, it's great to have the energy mix, and I think the energy mix is so important, but the oil and gas industry is so vital. And so the book is written to show that shows the past, a history, shows the present, where we are today, and the future. And we look at it from a standpoint that the EIA, which is the Energy Information Administration, projects that we have reserves of about 40 years of oil, 60 years of natural gas.
You're talking about internationally.
We're talking about internationally.
Yeah.
And we feel that the opportunity for Oklahoma, for example, is tremendous, and the nation. And so we should take a lead, and the breaking point means stop. Let's re-examine where we are, where we're going to go. We're reaching, right now the refining capacity is at peak. We reached peak oil in America in 1970. And where are we going now internationally? And so we need to stop, re-examine where we're going, what's the best way to approach it, in the next 20 years. And we see that renewables are a factor, but we're looking at, as far as the EIA, they said the next 20 years we're only going to have 10% as far as consumed using renewables. So we have some challenges ahead of us.
Mark, looking through your book, I noticed there's something that startled me. I wouldn't have predicted it at all, but you point out that there hasn't been a new refinery built in this country in the 20 some odd years.
That is correct.
That absolutely, considering the price of oil, price of gasoline, one would think that new refineries would be constructed. Why is that the case?
What occurred over the years is, of course, environmental compliance rulings and so forth, regulations, and so it got to the point that it was so difficult to fight the regs and environmental compliance that there were no refineries built.
And it's been proposed that Oklahoma would be a good site for one.
No question about
it. This population is probably going to be more receptive to the idea, and is probably less scared of big oil and big energy and fossil fuel, in general.
Sure.
Well, and we have a number already.
That's right.
That's right. And you take Cushing Field, for example, the Cushing pipeline being the pipeline crossroads of America, and yes, I think we do have great opportunities that way.
Short term, where are we headed with the price of oil?
Price of oil is, well, that's a good question. I wish I had the crystal ball and the answer, but I believe that there's so many different factors. The geopolitical situation that we have could drive the prices up or down. Whether we have a recession or not is whether it's global or just, in America that we have a recession is one thing. But right now we're going to see some price swings. And yes, I think we'll see some prices over the $100 barrel.
It hasn't been very long ago that I read in the newspaper an article that absolutely startled me and apparently startled a lot of other people because of the response to it. But it was a picture of Boone Pickens predicting that someday, not too far from then, the price of oil will be $100 a barrel.
Right.
Well, it didn't take very long for that to happen, although people were startled when he said it.
Yeah, and it may be more steady. If the economy continues as far as world economy and the demand, for example, in China and Russia and India occur, especially China, India, we're going to see some prices go above $100 for a steady period of time, much more than $100 a barrel. We're looking at, for example, in America, we use 2.8 gallons per person per day. In China, 0.2 gallons per day. The increase in demand is definitely going to occur because of appliances, cars, and so forth that Chinese are definitely wanting to purchase. So the demand is going to be there. Now, can we meet the supply? I don't know. That's a factor we're talking about today.
I was again struck. Viewers think I probably just sit around being struck all the time, but I was at the announcement of this Tata vehicle, right, which is a brand new mini car that they introduced in India about a week or so ago. That's going to get unbelievable gas mileage,
$2,500,
and it's going to cost $2,500. Well, the good news is it's going to cost $2,500. The bad news is it's going to cost $2,500 because that's going to make it available to so many more people in India than have a car now, that it's going to increase the demand for gasoline just exponentially.
No question.
And it's exactly, I think, falling into what you were talking about.
No question. And that goes right back to the book, the breaking point. Yeah. We're at a stopping point. We need to re-examine. We need to look at where we are going. The increase, again, the EIA figures, oil over the next 20 years is going to increase, as far as consumption, 33%, natural gas over 60% as far as the consumption level, and then we look at the demand for electricity, 40%. Are we going to be able to keep up with that? We're barely keeping up with it today. In America, we have 5% of the population of the world, and we use 25% of the energy. And yet, when we bring in the factor of China and India and other countries that are emerging, where are we going to be?
Well, we want to talk about OPEC, we want to talk about alternative fuels and how Oklahoma and the natural gas industry fits into all that. Mark Stansberry is our guest today on The Verdict, and we'll be right back.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
That land next door was a mess. Take more than a lawnmower to revive that land. I heard the oil and natural gas people was cleaning up old oil sites, and it wouldn't cost us a plug nickel. Oh yes, sir, it was quite a revival. The whole church showed up, want to make a playground for the kids. It sure is a blessing.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. Our guest is Mark Stansberry. We're talking about oil, natural gas, OPEC, alternative fuels, a lot of items in the energy industry. Kent?
Well, I certainly remember the OPEC oil embargo well back in the mid-'70s and the gasoline lines and all. And of course, it seems like OPEC still has an enormous impact on our life here in the United States. Is OPEC going to be able to sustain its current level of oil production for the foreseeable future?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we reached our peak in the United States in oil in 1970, and we're questioning now the OPEC information as far as reserves studies. They're not transparent. We don't know for sure, what the reserves really are. So it puts a big question mark of what the future really is. And again, that's the breaking point. We need to stop and examine that. Matt Simmons wrote a book, he's an investment banker out of Houston, wrote a book that was very well read among at least the energy sector called Twilight in the Desert. And he challenges Saudi Arabia and other countries, members of OPEC, where are your reserves? And in the next, he feels like it's sooner than later that we'll reach that peak. So we are at that stopping point, at least a breaking point.
You seem to be bullish on natural gas as compared to oil, coal, or alternative energies. Why is that?
Natural gas is the cleanest of the fossil fuels. I mean, if you take coal and oil, it's definitely the cleanest of the three. The abundance of natural gas, if we would open up our federal lands, especially in the Rockies, East Coast, West Coast, in Alaska, we have an abundance reserves of natural gas. So we have great opportunities, and I mentioned earlier, we have 16 years of reserves that we know of, but to open up these other areas for drilling, it would be great. But in our own backyard here in Oklahoma, we have a tremendous amount of natural gas. And it's interesting, the gross production tax, we used to think about oil, but in 2006, $1 billion, in excess of $1 billion for gross production tax off of natural gas primarily. And so natural gas is a big supporter of many things when you think about the roadways, education, and so forth, and the great hearts of the oil and gas industry in supporting that effort as well on their own.
Well, kind of tying into that, supporting things that go on around the industry, I know you were involved through Energy Advocates Group in the Centennial events. Tell us about that.
Yes, going back to 1974, the oil embargo time frame, the Energy Advocates was founded. And since that time, they put on forums, and they supported, they being oil and gas executives primarily in the past. Now, all forms of energy are represented by the Energy Advocates, not just in the oil and gas sector and the fossil fuels, but solar, wind, and so forth. And so members in nuclear as well come together, and we put on this year a Centennial events, 4 Centennial events under the Energy Advocates Energy Policy Conference. And we had a salute to women in energy that was held in Tulsa. Had a salute to the past. Governor Frank Keating led that effort. And then we had a salute to the present and a salute to the future, which is a salute to the future. It's one that's dear to my heart because it's scholarships to young folks going into energy management.
We hear a lot about energy independence. What does that mean, first of all, to you, and how achievable is that?
Well, I think it's better say getting less energy dependent than say independent. I think we've got to get there first. And that means that those countries that we identified in the breaking point that are anti-American, hostile to America, that we definitely need to look at increasing our reserves, going into the federal lands, increasing our reserves in natural gas fields, and have the support of the American public in a big way for the oil and gas industry to do their job. And that's where I hope that we become less dependent. To become independent is going to be many, many years down the road, but that's hopefully a goal that we can reach.
For the past 16 years or so, you've been involved with the International Energy Policy Conference. Yeah. Tell our viewers what that is. Realize now your office is right here in Oklahoma City, is it not?
Yes, well, we have a D.C. office, Washington, D.C., Oklahoma City, and Tulsa. And the International Energy Policy Conference was founded back in the 1990s, 1992. I had approached Dr. Gertz at the time, who was head of the Sarkis Energy Center, to hold an energy policy conference.
At OU.
At OU. And I had gone over to Russia, saw the problems that were there at that point in time with the delegation, and we saw that environmental energy infrastructure was in terrible shape. And so I was very encouraged to have this conference. And so we started the conference in 1992, and this is our 16th year to have a conference. This year will be in Washington, D.C. The State Chamber will be a co-host along with MIPT, which is the Memorial Institute for Prevention of Terrorism, and we'll have some other co-hosts as well. But we now have seen this become a forum to talk about energy policy issues, energy policy overall. We've had speakers from across the world, from Prime Minister of Scotland. We've had UN Ambassador Jean Kirkpatrick and others that were the honorary chairs as well.
I noticed that the Times Man of the Year was Mr. Putin from Russia, and you were talking about Russia's infrastructure. Has his leadership or control had any effect on Russia's infrastructure insofar as supplying their own energy is concerned?
We've been very careful not to be active in Russia. We were active for quite some time. We were approached back.
It's a little dangerous.
It's very dangerous, and we haven't seen that it's a great place to re-enter at this point from our perspective, GTD Group. We were approached back in the 90s. We visited with, at that time, Yuri Shafronik. There were 4 of us that met with him. He was the head of Minister of Energy for Russia. There were 35,000 idle wells in Russia. How can Americans help get those wells back in production? That has not been taken care of. There's still a bunch of wells that are idle.
In your book, The Breaking Point, you really are trying to call attention and a conclusion that you hope the reader reaches. What should this country do? If they took the advice that's in The Breaking Point, what changes would be made in the United States?
First of all, we would become, again, less dependent by opening up, encouraging the oil and gas industry to do their job. And
So is this a
opening up federal
different
lands.
national energy policy? Is this
Really,
a new focus?
It's similar to what I would say Sam Nunn said, Senator Sam Nunn, former senator, at a recent conference at OU. He said, we really don't have an energy policy. And I would say that's probably true.
Yeah, so we need one.
We need a comprehensive energy policy that addresses this and have the American public behind it. And that's where, instead of blaming, I would say that the consumer blames the government officials bring the oil and gas industry. Let's all come together and let's work for energy less energy dependence, and the goal to be independent down the road.
Got less than a minute to go. Environmentalists seem to be wanting to stop the fossil fuel industry from going further. How catastrophic could that be, not only for Oklahoma and the energy sector, but for the country as we look forward and trying to be productive in this century?
Well, it's going to definitely stop us in our tracks. We cannot really afford that. Part of our conference back in 1992 when it was founded was we were going to strive for energy and environmental preservation. That was really the theme of the conference. And that's what we want to do in the oil and gas industry. That's what we want to do in the energy sector overall. When I talk to those in any of these energy industries that are under the Energy Advocates umbrella, we all want to see environmental preservation. So we need to work together on that. But yes, it's a challenge.
All right. Mark Stansberry, his book is The Breaking Point, along with Jason P. Reinbold. We appreciate you coming on The Verdict today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Kent and I'll have a final word right after this.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
We are back on The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers wrapping up a show with Mark Stansberry in which we discovered his book, The Breaking Point, which really talks about what I think he would say is a potential coming crisis in worldwide production of energy and productivity.
Well, indeed, and I think it's generally recognized that that many of the elements he points out are potential problems, but this book is a good way to get them all in one spot and to try to balance one against the other. I think he's done an interesting, he and his co-author, Mr. Reinbold, have done a good job in balancing the various factors and trying to put it in perspective for us so that we can see what in the world we ought to do about energy.
And next week's show?
Next week we're going to be talking with Scott Meacham,
State Treasurer.
State Treasurer,
Okay.
and a frequent a visitor to the verdict.
Absolutely. I want to give information on this book. Thebreakingpoint.com is the website where you can go and order this. Yankee also said it was going to be available in your favorite bookstore before too long, too. And also, go to our website, theverdict.tv. Log in, check out our future shows, but tell us about shows that you'd like to see right here on The Verdict. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett, and we'll see you next week right here.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.